Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to talk about MySQL Server, MySQL Server modes. In particular, I'm going to talk about strict mode, what it is, how to turn it off, and why you'd want to. So strict mode is one of several MySQL Server modes that can be set. Strict mode produces an error and halts queries and updates when variable values are outside their allowed range or are missing. So turning off strict mode results in MySQL still producing an error, but the operation will continue with some default value such as 0 or null, or perhaps a truncated value to be inserted in place of the missing or erroneous value. Turning off strict mode may be required when running certain applications or when manually creating tables where intermediate operations may result in missing or incomplete data. There are other modes related to strict modes, such as whether to allow divide by 0, whether to allow invalid dates such as February 30th. That can also be set through some of these. Some of these are scheduled to be deprecated and incorporated into the strict mode basket. There's a complete discussion of this on the SQL Server documentation. You're looking at that page now. If you kind of scroll down here, this is a fairly lengthy discussion that if you're interested in this, you should probably take a look at. If you do choose to turn off strict mode or need to, then you're going to want to look at this section here so you understand exactly what's going to happen. If you do find yourself in a situation where some of these values are inserted into your database because of these errors, you're going to want to know what to look for. So it's a good idea to take a look here. But in this tutorial, I'm just going to briefly go through what you need to look for, what it takes to turn that off, turn it back on again, and so on. And then you can come back, and I think this page here is going to make a little bit more sense after you run through this tutorial. So the first thing to do, first of all, I'm going to make the comment that I'm working here on a virtual machine with Ubuntu 20.04 Long-Term Support Edition. My comments are going to refer primarily to 18.04 and up. The version that's installed on 20.04 of MySQL is 8.0. I think 18.04 last I saw was at MySQL 5.7. I'm not sure if they've updated to 8.0 yet, but older versions of Ubuntu Server may have a slightly different set. The documentation should cover that if it does, but this is pretty recent stuff. So the first thing we're going to do is verify whether strict mode is turned on, and whether you have to worry about this or not. It's turned on by default, so in most cases it's something that if you need to turn it off. So there's a couple of ways we can verify this. At the command line, I'm going to type in this command, and then you can take a look at the result. Take a look at that. You can pause it if you need to grab it. It's also documented in the documentation here. We'll take a look at that. You need to enter your MySQL password, not your root password or sudo password. And here's the result. Let me show you another way to grab this result, and then I'll talk about it. You can go directly into MySQL. If you are in MySQL, then the command that you need to enter is that for a second, and it's going to produce basically the same kind of result. And it's a list of the SQL modes that are implemented. These are all documented on the SQL page if you want to look each one of those up. The main one you're looking for is the strict _trans_ tables. That's the main indicator that strict mode is turned on for you. Several others in this group are related to that. No zero in date, no zero date, error for division by 0, no engine substitution. These are all related to strict mode. Some of these, as I mentioned, are scheduled to be deprecated. They will become part in future versions of the strict tables. There's another one, strict all tables. That's a variation on strict transactional tables. But if you see that, that means that strict mode is turned on and you're going to want to do something to turn it off. You have a couple of options. You can turn it off for just the session or just globally until MySQL is rebooted. Or you can turn it off using a configuration file every time MySQL is rebooted. And I'm going to show you first how to turn it off just for the session until MySQL is rebooted. Then I'll show you how to do the configuration file. So to turn it off for just the session, let's try this. We can turn it off for the session with a set command. And it's going to be set session. And we're going to set the SQL mode, SQL_MDE equals, and then we're going to type 2 single quote marks. That might look like a regular double quote mark, but it's 2 single quote marks. And of course, we need to truncate our line with a semicolon. Press return, and now if we let's see if I can get back to our previous command, show variables like SQL mode. We can see that we now have no value there, so we've turned off strict mode. And now for this current session in MySQL Monitor, strict mode is turned off. We can go ahead and do our operations. We don't have to worry about strict mode. But notice that once we quit, if we go back and take a look here, and check that once we've ended the session, these variables come back. So we can, and strict mode is on again, so we can go into MySQL again and do this globally until the next time the server is rebooted by making this a global command, and we do that basically just by substituting global instead of session. So we can go, let's see, where am I? Yes, set global this time. And again, our 2 single quote marks. And now if we quit and we go back and check out our variables, we can see that now globally we've done that. But once we restart the MySQL, to restart the MySQL service, and this is our sudo password at this point. Sudo MySQL restarts. And now, if we check our variables, oops, need the MySQL password there, my error. We can see that our strict mode is turned on again. So this only lasts until you restart the MySQL server. And this may be what you want. In general, you only want to turn off strict mode in cases where you need to, and there's a good reason to, because strict mode does prevent you from getting bad data in your database. But as we talked about at the top of the tutorial, there are times when you need to do it. If it turns out that you're running an application that requires you to turn off strict mode, there is a way you can do this with a configuration file, so that every time the MySQL server is restarted, then strict mode will be turned off by default. And the way you do that is as follows. So we're going to create a new file, a new configuration file. A couple of different places you can do this. You can read the documentation depending on how you're set up. If you're in an enterprise situation, you may only want to do this for a certain application, a certain area, a certain instance of MySQL Server, so you can read the documentation. I'm going to suggest a location for this. If you have a basic simple setup, then this should work fine for you. If you're in an enterprise, you're going to need to check with your system administrator. So here's what I'm going to suggest, and we can do it like this. So the directory I'm going to suggest is /etc/etc/mysql/conf.d. The name of the file doesn't really matter all that much. It'll pick it up. I'm going to call it disable_strict_mode.cnf. It has to be a CNF extension. That's going to open up a new file for us. The first line needs to be bracket. Let's see. MySQL bracket, and we just need one line here, and that's going to be SQL mode. That's the variable that we've been setting. SQL_MODE, and that's our familiar equals, and then the two single brackets. We don't need a line feed after that, and then we're going to save this with Control X. And then Y, enter to save it, and we'll save the file. And now we need to restart the MySQL server to get that going. Okay, now we can see that if we take a look at what our variables are, we can see that there we go. We can see that we have disabled strict mode. Sorry about the bad command there. Too many in the queue. So now that we've seen how to disable strict mode using the configuration file, and so that strict mode will be disabled each time we start MySQL, it'd be a good idea to come back to this web page here, for the different server SQL modes, and go through them and see if there aren't any that you may want or need to implement. By default, pretty much what comes with an installed system is strict mode enabled. The cluster of ones that you see there all basically have to do with setting strict mode and error checking. There are quite a few in here. You may or may not need any of those. If you do need them, let me bring this page back up and go to the command that I was mistyping before, and enter the correct password this time. If there are any that you need to add back in, you can insert them here between these quote marks. So just enter them here. So if we needed to add no engine substitution, and I believe case does count here. So if we needed to add that one back in, we would put it in here. You can add more than one, separate them with commas, no spaces, exactly like they are on this page. And I'm going to get out of here and answer no to not save that. But and if you have ones that you need to add beyond what the defaults were, and you wanted to keep your strict mode on, then what you would do is you would take the list of variables, modes that are in the default, and add any that you wanted to include beyond those, and include all of those. And you can use a configuration file that way as well to add additional modes besides the ones that are configured. One final word of caution is that I'm using a default installed system. This is what came with the Ubuntu 20.04 installation in a virtual machine. If you have a working system that possibly somebody has modified for you, it's possible that there's a configuration file already out there. And if this doesn't seem to work for you, or you're not getting the results you think you should, you may have to do some rooting around to find whatever configuration file is already out there. There are a few different places these files can go, and a few different names these files can have. It's mostly just a matter of tracking down the different locations that are legal locations for configuration files for MySQL, taking a look and seeing what's in those, and seeing if perhaps these SQL modes are perhaps listed somewhere else, and doing that tracking down. So I hope this has been helpful for you, give you some basic information about strict mode. It's an area that going through some files and help and so on the web, I see some confusion and people having problems with this. So if this clears it up for some of you, that's great. Post any questions you have down in the comments below, and I try to keep up with those. So good luck, and thanks for watching.